Today on CBC News, we'll be looking at why Canada is so much better than the United States. As always, our daily coverage on Justin Trudeau and why he is the greatest Prime Minister in the world. In-depth coverage on his luxuriant hair and how he stays so fabulous and loved at home and abroad. Also, we will smear those that wish to have their rights as free citizens as the far right, and how they are to blame for climate change. Stay tuned to CBC News.
This video is kindly sponsored by Atlas VPN, and right now they're running a huge Black Friday discount, which means you can get yourself a 3-year subscription for only $1.70 a month with 6 extra months free. And if you don't like it, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. And this sale will end soon, so do yourself a favor and pick up this deal ASAP. Why use Atlas VPN? Well, it gives you security when using public Wi-Fi, data privacy from your ISP, but most importantly, from prying eyes. You can also save big by location spoofing capabilities in that many businesses like airlines, subscription services, and game platforms like Steam offer different prices depending on where you are. If you change the appearance of your location to a place where services are offered cheaper, you can end up with big savings. Help support this channel and give yourself the privacy and location freedom that Atlas VPN provides and leave no digital footprints behind. It's ridiculously cheap, easy to use, and simply necessary if you use the internet. My thanks for the support, and remember, the link to Atlas VPN is in the description. Canada, it goes without saying, is a vast country, and it has many things going for it. Beautiful nature, a non-aggressive neighbor to the south, and many raw resources. And for those that are not familiar with the country, it's made up of 10 provinces and 3 territories. If I were to compare these provinces to American states, it would look something like Ontario equaling New York, British Columbia, California, Alberta, Texas, Saskatchewan, Iowa, Manitoba, Nebraska, Quebec, a cleaner, more civilized Louisiana, New Brunswick equals West Virginia, Nova Scotia, Massachusetts, Prince Edward Island equals Rhode Island, and Newfoundland and Labrador, maybe Kentucky. But that's just my opinion. Getting the obvious out of the way, Canada is not what it used to be, and rather than wax lyrical on what makes Canada a good country, as so many videos do, in this space we will examine, unfortunately, the underbelly, the ugly underbelly of the not-so-great white north of today, and why, if you're thinking of coming to live in Canada, well, you might want to reconsider. First, one of the things that Canadians endlessly like to congratulate themselves over is their government-provided healthcare system, which has pretty much gone down the toilet over the past 2 decades. It's not even in the top 10 worldwide and is in fact rated number 35 globally, probably the lowest in the developed world. And it also has some of the longest waiting times for patients. So put simply, the healthcare in Canada, well, it's not that good. And it's also a place where a significant number of people agree that people should be euthanized for being a drug addict or simply being poor. And Canada does euthanize people because they are poor. The cost of living, well, it's totally and completely out of control. Canadian households now have the worst debt ratio of any G7 country, and housing is so expensive that it is out of reach, not only for those newly arrived, but for younger Canadians that have been in the country for generations. In fact, the cost of living crisis means that more and more Canadians are putting parenthood on pause or simply not having any children. And let's also be blunt. Canada is usually not people's first choice when they are seeking to move to a Western nation. In fact, many of those that are arriving do so only once they are rejected by the United States. In fact, Canada spends tens of millions of dollars per year on sponsoring ads on social media alone, trying to lure people to the country. And what happens to many of those new arrivals that Canada lured into the country? Well, they stay for a few years and then say thank you, but no thank you, and then pull up sticks and leave. In that, Immigrants to Canada are increasingly leaving for opportunities elsewhere, with the number of immigrants who left Canada rising by 31% above the national average in 2017 and 2019. The cited reasons for people leaving include, well, of course, economic integration, a sense of belonging, crisis of living costs, home ownership or lack thereof, and lack of economic opportunities. And nearly half of all Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. Grim news indeed. Almost as grim as the long freezing winters that bless this very, very cold country. But getting the more widely understood information out of the way, I would suggest that many of the problems that Canada faces have been created in an act of national self-sabotage with very few solutions, and the country is now basically one large Ponzi scheme that is in fact not a land of opportunity for newcomers, but a trap. Now, why is it a trap? Take, for example, the booming business of international students who pump more than $21 billion into the economy every year through student spending and tuition. Canada, of course, wants this money, and it also wants the money of those newly arrived to spend once they get there. Put simply, Canada is a country that tricks immigrants into coming to the country as they advertise it as the USA, but without the guns. However, what many of those who arrive come to realize very quickly is that there is very little chance of economic mobility and living in a country that is not only crazy expensive, but one that taxes everyone to the point of being cattle. They understand that it is a socialist freezer. But it's too late by then, as the Canadian government has taken away all of their life savings, and they're now trapped in that country. It's a meticulously orchestrated plan, in my opinion. For example, there are actual enterprises in India dedicated to coaching young adults on how to migrate to Canada. However, it's a deceptive scheme. They make promises of providing first world education, which they fail to deliver, and instead these individuals end up spending 4 to 8 years working in low-paying service jobs. Even upon graduation, actually living in Canada is becoming harder and harder and harder for everyone. And this leads many of them to eventually abandon their Canadian dreams and return to their home country. And on the flip side, well, what does Canada gain? Well, it gains billions of dollars from would-be newcomers and a readily available minimum wage workforce to fill the voids created by an economy with stagnant growth, an insistence on perpetual population expansion to prop up real estate prices, and a low birth rate resulting from inadequate wages. Going forward, I believe, unfortunately, that Canada will probably have the same standard of living as much of Latin America and the developing world within the next few short decades. It's about to lag behind massively due to Canada's commitment to population growth at all costs and its Ponzi scheme of an economy. Canada is just a few percentage points in interest rates from serious trouble, and once they do rise and people become even more strangled by the phantom economy built on out-of-control real estate prices, well, then the political crisis will begin. So to put simply, Canada isn't a country, Canada is not a nation. It's an economic zone where the only goal is to make as much money as you can at the expense of others, because if you aren't, your neighbor is. Very importantly, Canada lacks enduring traditions and values and thus an identity, as its history is marked by a continual influx of conquerors seeking to exploit its resources, from the French exploiting the indigenous people to the English subjugating the French, and that pattern continues with American influence over the country to this day. When Canada broke free of its historical European roots in the late 1960s and early 70s, it did not replace its cultural traditions and values with anything. Just a mantra of catchphrases and feel-good supposed shared values. Thus, as Justin Trudeau has stated that Canada is the world's first post-national country with no mainstream culture and nothing for newcomers to assimilate into, well, the absence of shared and solidified values or cultural traditions has resulted in a lack of genuine understanding of what Canadian identity is. Consequently, the so-called culture is reduced to cliches like hockey and Tim Hortons and superficial politeness, the first two being mere corporate slop and the third not reflecting the true nature of Canadian interactions. Now, it should be said, and to be fair, Canadians, particularly the average white middle-class individual, might not be considered the worst people globally, but unquestionably they stand out as some of the most compliant and obedient plebs on the planet. Their deep-seated affinity for rules and regulations is undeniable to anyone that has ever lived there. Rules seem to hold a special place of reverence in the heart of your typical Canadian, who not only loves discussing existing regulations, but also advocates for more and more. Conversations frequently revolve around specific rules, instances of rule breaking, and the collective disapproval of those deemed rule breakers. Thus, to sum this entire video up, if I were seeking to find opportunities in a Western country, Canada would not be at the top of that list, as Canada in the current year is one of the least cohesive globalist puppet states on the planet. And remember, not to get poor. The Canadian government will happily assist you in your suicide, and I can just see their approval letter now. Your MAID number is up. Please report to your local MAID Center for liquidation. Remember to be polite at all times. Oh, Canada. So then, everyone, thanks very much for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and check to see that you're still subscribed, as YouTube has unsubscribed tens of thousands of people without their knowledge or consent. Also, remember to check out my sponsor at the beginning of this video. It's very much appreciated, and it helps the channel immensely. Till then, I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.